FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming to clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey!
Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys.
And we are continuing to describe the FAIRtax, the important points of the FAIRtax, using an old refrain that I'm sure most of you are familiar with if you've ever heard Jeff Foxworthy on the TV or the radio.
That's the you might be a redneck guy, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Bob, you can do a pretty good Jeff Foxworthy.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, well, better than I can.
Well, that's because you're a Yankee and I'm a Southerner. You asked.
We spent the last two programs using that technique to introduce certain points of the FAIRtax because there are features of the FAIRtax that are very good for us. And we think that most of you, all of you, will be fans of the FAIRtax once you learn about what it does for us, individually and as a country. So this is a great way to introduce it. Now, we've already introduced 6 of these points. And we're going to review them all when we get done. But we need to move on with the next one. So we're using the talents of Mr. Bob Paxton, a.k.a. Mr. Bob Paxworthy, to introduce the FAIRtax to you via the Jeff Foxworthy method. So what's the next one, Bob?
Well, listen, if you would like to be in control of how much tax you pay, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
What a concept.
Yeah, when you fill out your tax returns for your income tax, they tell you how much tax you owe. You don't have any choice. You got to send in what they tell you to. It's
been decided by Congress and influenced by the lobbyists. I mean, we have right now almost no control, very little representation. Yeah, we elect our congressmen and our senators, but once they get up there, we have very little influence on them. The lobbyists have a lot of influence. So we have no control right now over how much we pay. We do what the laws are passed. And if we don't like our congressman and what they voted for, then we can vote for a different congressman and try to get some changes. But it's a slow process. And it's a slow process on purpose because that's the way the founders wanted it. They didn't want the country jerking from one side to the other, on a whim. So there is a reason for that, but that's all totally unnecessary under the FAIRtax. The FAIRtax, you determine how much you pay by your spending habits.
Yeah, the rate is set by law.
That's right.
Then how many dollars come out of your pocket is determined by how many dollars you spend at the cash register.
That rate, by the way, is 23%, as we mentioned before. And how did they come at to that figure? They did millions of dollars worth of research. All right, if we had a national sales tax and if the government spending is this much, what would be required? What percentage? And it is 23%. It might vary from 22.5% to 23.1%, but it doesn't vary much.
Because that's 23% inclusive, meaning two things. That the tax is included in the price. You're not going to take a $100 item and be charged $123 at the cash register for it. And the 23% is how much of the total that you spend is FAIRtax. And again, it's included in the price. So if you buy a $100 item, $23 of those 100 is FAIRtax. It's not added on afterwards. It's included in the price. And that's the way they quote the income tax. So that's the way we quote the FAIRtax.
That's right. That's the way the income tax works. If right now, if you get a job at $50,000 a year, you don't take home $50,000 because that includes the income tax that goes to Uncle Sam. So getting back to this, how is it under the FAIRtax that you can determine how much tax you pay? Well, it's by your spending habits, all right? If you go buy a pair of jeans, you have the choice of buying designer jeans or off-the-rack jeans. I mean, if you go buy a suit, if a guy goes buy a man's suit for work, he can have it custom tailored or he can buy it off the rack. if you go buy a car, here's an even better choice. Not only can you decide how expensive a car, it's obviously what you can afford, but you have the choice of buying a used car. If you buy a used car, there's no fair tax on that because used items are not charged. Again, there's no double dipping under the fair tax. So once that car was sold at the dealership by the original consumer who paid the fair tax is never charged on that item again. That goes for a car, a house, anything that can be sold and resold. All right. And just as an aside, too, we also mentioned that business-to-business purchases are not subject to the fair tax. So if a business purchases a pickup truck, uses it for 3 or 4 years, all right, first off, when they buy the pickup truck, okay, they don't have to pay the fair tax. But when it's sold out of the business back to the back to the public, then it's charged. Okay, So you determine your level of taxation by your spending habits, and you do have a lot of control over that.
Yeah,
so
you're
in
new
charge.
Versus used is huge. That's a biggie. Let's move on here. This is a biggie point. Ready? If you'd like to see millions of jobs created and outsourced jobs come home, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
That's an important one.
That is a big one, and it's something that a lot of people don't really understand because we're living now in a global economy. The people that build cars in America are competing with people that build cars in Japan and build cars in Korea, and that's just one example. But lots of goods are sold on the global market, and when American goods come to the global market, because the companies have to pay income tax, there is a tax component that is embedded in the price of everything that our American people have to sell on the global market. Because they're having to pay income tax. Well, the fair tax, as you mentioned, business to business is not taxed. Stuff that is created for export is not taxed. There is no tax component in the price of exported goods under the fair tax, making American companies much, much more competitive on the global market. And, jobs go overseas because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Companies can make more money by, outsourcing jobs. When they no longer have to have the income tax included in the price of their goods, hey, we can make it cheaper in America. We're going to do that.
We're going to go, when the fair tax is passed and becomes law, we're going to be one of the highest corporate, in fact, I think we are the highest corporate tax rate in the world and to the lowest.
Yeah, you don't get less than zero.
Yeah, that's right. So that's going to be a huge blessing to people in business. First off, the fair tax, because it's so simple, is going to reduce all the paperwork that businesses have to do. They're not going to have to do withholding, for FICA and for income tax. There's that all that goes away. It simplifies their business, and like Bob says, the embedded costs, all the embedded costs that are due to not only the tax but complying with the tax. Everything a business has to do to make sure they're complying with the law and to make sure they're taking advantage of every legal loophole that's in there. All that stuff goes away and their cost of doing business comes down. So like Bob says, when they sell a car overseas, or whatever it is, when they sell something and it goes overseas, those embedded costs go away. All right, they're in there right now. They're not stated on the receipt because they're hidden. They're like, you can't see them.
It's just like any other cost of doing business is being passed on to the final consumer.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. Well, the cost of doing business comes down. So to sell it overseas is going to be much easier for our American companies. And here in this country, because it's going to be easier to do business is going to expand. In another program, we're going to handle this in detail, just what our business is going to do with the savings. All right, that's a subject for a whole show. But anyways, it's going to make it easier for businesses to do business. Jobs are going to be created because they're going to have more demand. People are going to have more spending money because, one, they're going to get their whole paycheck. Two, they're going to get the prebate. Every American is going to have more disposable cash. That means more consumers and better consumers. So companies are going to have to meet the demand. And if they make more stuff, they have to hire more people to make that stuff or provide those services. And the fair tax is going to do all this, again, mostly because of its simplicity.
Yeah. And again, you hear people, beating on these companies that are taking jobs overseas. And all they're doing is they are behaving the same way that you and I would. If you can shop at your little neighborhood store or one across town, but the one across town is cheaper, you're going to go across town.
That's right.
So if you want to make businesses stay in America rather than berating them, and like some of the political folks are doing, and saying how awful it is that these companies are moving to Mexico and moving to China and what, but the solution is very simple. Just simply make it economically the best choice they could make to stay in America.
The current tax code is chasing jobs away from our country. It's literally chasing jobs away from us.
When it is most economically feasible to produce things in America, they'll do it. It's that simple. And the fair tax goes a long way to making that happen.
Yeah. So the fair tax, when it's signed into law, it's going to have a near immediate effect. You're going to see the economy bump up. You're going to see jobs created. You're going to see companies better able to compete with their overseas competitors.
Yeah. Again, I don't remember exactly where I saw this study one time, but about 500 CEOs, CFOs, major corporate executives of major international corporations were surveyed and were asked what would happen, what would be their reaction if the income tax rate in America went to zero. And like 40% of them said they would build their next plant or their next distribution center, next factory, what have you, in America. The other 60% said they'd move the whole country here, or the whole company here.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was very dramatic, the results of that survey. Because if they can go, and that's exactly why our companies are going over there. I've used this example before. Some years ago, Chrysler and Daimler from Germany merged, and it became Daimler Chrysler with their headquarters in Germany instead of Chrysler Daimler with their headquarters in Detroit, because there was a 14-point advantage in the tax code to move it over to Germany. Our tax code is chasing business offshore. It's chasing jobs offshore.
Yeah, they call that corporate inversion.
Yeah.
You hear people talking about that. It's when an American company either moves offshore, merges with a foreign company, and then moves to the foreign headquarters because it's more advantageous tax-wise to do that.
And Bob, there's one thing that really frosts me about that. Because after these congressmen and senators vote for this law and change the corporate tax structure so that it's chasing companies offshore, they're the ones that are doing it. Then they come out and say, "Oh, these companies are going offshore. That's unpatriotic. We have to penalize them." Right. So you penalize them with an onerous tax code. That's why they're leaving. Then you want to penalize them some more. Come on, folks. Let's wake up here.
Those are where our jobs come from, guys. We need to recognize that.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and move on. Here's another rather large point that people would not understand yet about the fair tax. Because one of the biggest complaints about the income tax is how unfair it is. Talk about the Warren Buffett effect, how he pays a lower tax rate on his multiplied $1 million income than his secretary did. And the truth of the matter is, if you'd like to see everybody pay their fair share, no loopholes, no exemptions, no deductions for the well-heeled, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
Yeah, that's right. You probably, if you take a look at the brackets, the income brackets, I believe we have 7 of them right now. Okay, and
it used to be flat, but it didn't stay flat, did it?
Not very long, did it? No. And in the past 7 or 8 years, they've added a couple more brackets. Reagan dropped it down to, I think, 2 brackets, and ever since then it has popped up to a few more brackets. And what they do is that at the lower level, the lowest income bracket, the rate is very low, like I think 10%. Don't quote me on this anyways. And each bracket with increasing income, the percentage gets higher. This is Congress's attempt to make it a progressive income tax, where the people who make more not only pay more, but pay a higher rate. But then, after doing that, they put in all these loopholes and exemptions and special considerations and deductions so that if you are a well-heeled taxpayer and you can afford a very good tax attorney, or you're a company that has a battery of tax attorneys, you can find all these legal loopholes and deductions and thereby reduce your tax burden. So, yeah, you might be in an upper tax bracket, but that doesn't mean your effective tax rate is within that tax bracket. No. So Congress plays it both ways. Yes, the rich need to pay more, but at the same time, we're going to give the rich some special considerations so they don't have to pay more. But we're going to accuse them of not paying more.
Yeah, but then you get income that's earned, i.e. working for wages, versus investment type income, dividends or selling stocks and stuff like that. And all that's taxed at different rates. That's where Warren Buffett makes a lot of his money. He does not get much of a salary, I guarantee you. He makes most of his income off investments and trades like that. And that's taxed at a different rate than his secretary pays.
Yeah, but he still pays more in taxes.
Yeah, I do.
Total more. The rate might be less.
The total number of dollars is higher, no doubt, but the rate is different. And that's just wrong.
Yeah.
You really should have the more, with the fair tax, again, you tax spending. It doesn't really matter how much you've got, where you made it, or anything like that. Spending is spending. Whether I buy a bottle of aspirin, you buy a bottle of aspirin, or Donald Trump buys a bottle of aspirin, it's the same. It's the same cost for all of us, and we would all pay the same amount of fair tax on that purchase.
Yep.
The difference would be, of course, us low-income people have that covered by the prebate, and that's another issue we'll get to later.
Yeah. So, anyways, as you think about our current tax system and the way Bob and I have been describing it, doesn't it sound like somebody tried to give us the worst possible tax system in the world and force it upon us? I mean, it didn't start out that way. You know, as Bob mentioned a few minutes ago, it started out at a flat, very low tax rate. The top rate was 7% on the most wealthy Americans, and it very quickly went from 7 to 0. Congress learned right away that they could mess around with this tax code. And then they started putting in the deductions and the special considerations and so forth. Yeah. And what we have now is a behemoth of over 70,000 pages, of which we are all responsible. When you sign your name to your tax return, you are claiming that you understand the tax code. And I don't know about you, but I don't. I just hope that the people who make the tax software that I use understand it.
Yeah, but the rich don't pay their fair share has been political rhetoric that we have heard all our lives. And there's, of course, a kind of a certain amount of truth to it. But again, if you look at the figures, that the upper income earners pay a much higher proportion of the overall tax bill, but still there are individuals that are messing with the system and stuff like that. But with the fair tax, it all goes away because everybody pays the same amount at the cash register. You get your prebate back to make sure that your spending up to the poverty level is not taxed at all. Then above that, the more you spend, the more you take out of your own pocket to pay the fair tax, and it is mathematically impossible for someone who spends more to pay a lower rate than someone who spends less.
Yep.
Really simple, perfectly fair. Everybody ought to love it.
Under the fair tax, it is genuinely progressive, and Congress can't mess around with it. By the way, with the current system right now, with all the lobbyists that the corporations and the wealthy people have, how many people listening to the show right now have their own private lobbyist? Raise your hand.
No.
Yeah.
Afraid not.
No, not us. Nope. So that's an advantage for another group of people.
So if you'd like to put the tax code beyond the reach of those lobbyists and special interests, you might be a FAIRtax fan.
That's right.
Because there will be no special deductions, no special loopholes, no special treatment for anybody. If you change the rate, it affects everybody.
And I think that is one of the reasons that we're going to have such a monumental battle getting this through Congress, because there are people in Congress who just love the idea that they can use the tax code to reward their friends and punish their enemies and play class warfare via the tax code. And so those folks who have made a career out of Congress, all right, career in Congress shouldn't go together, but unfortunately, that's what we have. Those people are not really going to like the fair tax. But they're coming around. We've talked to Steve Hayes, our national president, and they are coming around. They are understanding that the current tax code is out of control. It's imploding under its own weight because of evasion. Evasion is becoming a serious, serious problem. And not only that, the IRS is not a real popular organization right now, wouldn't you say, Bob?
I'd say it's more like a criminal enterprise in some cases.
I heard on the
power of law behind it.
On the way to the studio today, I was listening to the radio, and the commissioner, the IRS commissioner, was beckoned to be at a congressional hearing. He didn't show up. And some of the people in Congress are not too happy with him right now. My advice, Mr. Commissioner, you might want to get your resume in order, because I think you're going to need to brush up on it a bit.
All righty. Well, let's go through the whole list here for just a second. You said you wanted to do something before that.
Oh, yeah. Well, first, all right, we're going to go through all 10 of them. And we could come up with more, but these are probably the 10 most important. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me try that again.
Take two.
All right, it's my first day with my new tongue.
Live radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Mr. Bob Paxton, a.k.a. Mr. Bob Paxworthy.
All righty. I tell you what, I've got lots of good reasons here for you to like the fair tax and to want to get rid of the income tax. First and foremost, folks, if you'd like more money in your pocket by eliminating federal withholding and payroll taxes, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you think feeding your family is a higher priority than feeding the government, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to get a tax refund every month instead of maybe once a year, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to save and invest totally free of federal taxation, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to eliminate the IRS from the face of the earth forever, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you like the idea of keeping the government out of your personal financial business, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you would like to be in control of how much tax you pay, you might be a FAIRtax fan. If you'd like to see millions of jobs created and outsourced ones come home, you might be a FAIRtax fan. And if you'd like to see everybody pay their fair share with no loopholes, no exemptions, no deductions, you might be a FAIRtax fan. And if you'd like to put the tax code beyond the reach of lobbyists and special interests, you might be a FAIRtax fan. Yeah, go back and check all that out. That was fun.
We're doing this because we're trying to obviously generate interest for the fair tax. All right? We need you to help us out. You can help us out in several ways. Learn more about it by, one, buying the book. All right? There's a couple of books. The FAIRtax book by Bortz and Linder. They have two editions, the first one and the second one. You can go to the website, fairtax.org. There is huge amounts of information. They have a frequently asked questions. They got a section on videos. Fairtax.org also has a place on YouTube, too. So you can look up the YouTube channel for fairtax.org. Lots of good videos up there. In fact, you'll even find one with Mr. Paxton doing his routine there. Yep. So, or I should say Mr. Paxworthy.
Mm-hmm. I like the guy from Brooklyn out there, too. He's pretty good.
BigSolution.org. This is a real important one. If you feel strongly enough about the fair tax, if you've learned enough to realize, hey, this is something we really need to get behind and we need all hands on deck, that's where you can go, BigSolution.org, and that's going to be the place where you can get involved. All right, you can connect, you can do all the little things there that it helps you. You can put the fair tax at the reach of some of your friends and family members. So, BigSolution.org. If you have questions, you can email us, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. Thefairtaxguys@gmail.com. If there's something you don't understand or you think we got something wrong, fine, send us an email. Because, Bob and I are not the experts, but we have some experts backing us up. And whenever I have a question that I can't answer, I email one of these folks and they give me the answer. That's it.
All right. Now, I'll tell you something else that you can really do and get involved in. This is on more than just the FAIRtax. We've talked about this before, a website called PopVox, Popvox. That is where you can communicate directly with your congressmen and senators. Let them know what you think for or against any piece of legislation. Popvox, and again, the FAIRtax is H.R. 25 in the House, and the SB is at 155 this time in the Senate. And there's well over 90% approval on both of those things. And Congress people pay attention to that. So go out there and register your support for the FAIRtax on PopVox.
Yep, that's a great website. The FAIRtax logo store. If you would like to buy some FAIRtax pocket cards to give out to your friends. We even have these little business card size. We call them the prebate card. They have it's the size of a standard business card. They have some basic information about the FAIRtax on one side and the prebate schedule on the back side. All right, those are a relatively new item, and they've been very, very popular. FAIRtaxlogostore.org.
Yeah, and that prebate again is the refund that you get every month instead of just maybe once a year.
Yep. I mean,
that's what really makes the FAIRtax fair.
What could be better than that?
Now, your wife is going to shoot you if you don't mention the webinar.
Oh, yeah, because my wife is involved in helping out with this webinar. The fourth Thursday of every month, the fourth Thursday at 8 p.m., there is a FAIRtax webinar. It's free. You have to go to fairtax.org/webinar. fairtax.org/webinar. That sets you up with a registration page. They have to have your email, obviously, so that they can send you the link. So you register there. They send you a link at about 5 minutes before 8 on that Thursday. And they'll send you a couple of reminders. About 5 minutes before 8, you click the link. Your computer gets on. I believe it's a GoToMeeting site. And Larry Walters and Mark Maneri, they run the webinar. They've been doing this, I think they're in their 7th year, very successfully, very knowledgeable. Larry is one of the most knowledgeable people about the FAIRtax I've ever met. And you can ask questions. It's interactive. You can type in your questions, and they will do their best to answer it. So the webinar is another good way. And tell your friends and family about it, too. All right? FAIRtax.org/webinar.
Now, here's a neat way you can support the FAIRtax painlessly. FAIRtaxrewards.com.
Yeah, that's right. FAIRtax Rewards. Yep.
That's not on your list here. I just thought of that.
Yep. Yeah, I got to put that on the list there. When you do your shopping, if you're going to, some people, and this is a great idea. They're busy. They have their jobs to go to and so forth, and they need to pick up something at Target or Sears or Walmart or something like that. And they get online, they order the thing, they pay for it, and they say, I want to pick it up at this store. So they have it reserved for them. Okay, before you do that, if you go to FAIRtaxrewards.com, and from there, go to the store or shop for the item you want, find out where it is at the store, and order from there. As long as you go to FAIRtaxrewards.com first.
Now, you'll end up on the original website, yep. Walmart or Target or whatever. Just get there through the FAIRtaxrewards.com.
You'll get a small kickback, and so will the FAIRtax people, the national organization. So you'll get what you need. It's waiting at the store when you go pick it up, and you get a little kickback, and the FAIRtax people, the national organization, Americans for Fair Taxation, they get a little stipend too, so it helps.
Yes, so we need you to join AFFT as well. We need membership so that the Congress critters, like you call them, will know that we represent a lot of votes out here that want to see the FAIRtax happen.
Very important, very important. FAIRtax.org to become a member.
All right, and that's just about going to wrap it up for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Thank you for listening today, and reminding you that the FAIRtax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey! On April 15th, when you're all out of sorts, you got to listen to Lynn. much better way. It makes April 15th just another spring day. Fair tax is coming, don't stand in the way. Fair tax is coming, roll the USA. Fair tax is coming to clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey! Pages of IRS confusion all goes away with the fair tax solution. Keep what you earn, your wallet gets fat, money to burn. What's the problem with that? Fair tax is coming, don't stand in the way. Fair tax is coming, cause the USA. Fair tax is coming to clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey! We've got to stop the tax madness. Eliminate the sadness. Initiate some gladness. Let's sing it again. Fair tax is coming, don't stand in the way. Fair tax is coming.